Hey BookTube, it's Angie. You may hear some barking and shuffling and stuff in the background pretty soon because my mister is due home from work any minute and the dog is probably going to go crazy, but I have the door closed, so hopefully it'll be kind of muffled. But yeah, if you hear that in the background, that's what that is. I have a new camera now. Unfortunately, I forgot to format it before I did this video. I had it charged and everything, and then I realized I didn't monkey with settings and all that, so I'm gonna need a little time to tinker with all that and get all the settings right. So until I get there, we're gonna have another video or two with the old camera. I'm hoping the new camera will fix the yellow issue in my videos and make things a little bit clearer for you guys, fix the lag hopefully. With that said, welcome to this video. Today I'm going to talk about books that are geared towards people who are big vintage lovers, vintage clothes, that kind of thing. All the eras but their own. Before I get to that, I have a small book outlet unboxing to get to that I thought I would share with you guys since I was planning on filming anyway. I figured what the heck, I'd throw a mini unboxing unbagging in. This package is from recently. Book Outlet did a sale with 30% off their scratch and dent section, so I figured I would take a look. And normally what I do with the scratch and dents is, or just books on Book Outlet in general, if I find a title that sounds interesting, I check it against Amazon and see how many copies Amazon has, you know, because it helps me kind of curb insane amounts of book buying. If I go on Amazon and see that like Book Outlet only has like 15 copies or 6 copies or whatever, and then I go on Amazon and I see that Amazon has like 70 or 112 or whatever, if it looks like the book is going to be on there a while, then I will wait on getting it. So usually the ones I get from Book Outlet are ones that either aren't widely available on Amazon or Book Outlet just had the better price. So let's see, I don't totally remember what I got because you know how Book Outlet goes, you get it like, you know, 10 years later. Oh yay, I got a coupon. So what all I get? Alright, I got Light in the Shadows by A. Meredith Walters. This is actually the sequel to, what was the name of that book? Find You in the Dark, I think is the first book. These are available on Amazon, but with this particular one, I'm not sure why, but these books are a few dollars more on Amazon. So when I found this a couple bucks cheaper on Book Outlet, I figured I would at least get the second one because it was a series that I wanted to read. So eventually when I find a good price on, I think there's 3 in the series right now, so when I find a good price on the other 2, I will put them together and read those. I also was pretty psyched because I found a scratch and dent copy of The Humans by Matt Haig. I guess that's why it's scratch and dent. I don't know if that shows up, but it has a little box cutter cut in the back, but I'm alright with that. That's not gonna bug me because otherwise this is in perfect condition. I read The Dead Fathers Club by Matt Haig and really enjoyed it. And I've heard really good things about The Humans. I've been hearing people rave about it on Twitter, so I wanted to check it out. And then the other one I got is Shine, Shine, Shine by Lydia Netzer. I think I got this one because, I mean, it's been on my TBR for a while anyway, but I think I got this because I read a more in-depth synopsis of what this book was about. I knew it had to do with a couple that had known each other since childhood, and then they grow up and get married, and then as a married couple, it talks about how their idealistic view of romance and relationships and stuff starts to wear off a little bit once they're married and life sets in. And I knew that was part of it, but then I think I read something a little bit more in depth that mentions that they go on to have a autistic son, I believe. So I was going to check this one out and maybe squeeze it into my autism and Asperger's video coming up pretty soon. I know when I had mentioned in the last video that I just had look me in the eye, and that was the last one, but then I forgot I had ordered this one, so it may be that one and this one, but these are both really short, so yeah, I may knock this one out, and you may be hearing about this one pretty soon. So those are the 3 I got from the scratch and dent section. I think total that cost me a whopping $9 with shipping for all 3 of those. So I was okay with that. So yeah, let's get on to the rest of the video. So I was going to talk about today, well, there's the dog barking, guess he's home. Okay, so I'm going to start with these, like I said, these, oh, whoops. Okay, I got that wrong. I said that this was about vintage lovers. That's actually the next video I was going to film. I'm actually have 2 in my head today. That was the next one. This this video is for the video I was talking about doing about books that have to do with people coming together as a club, or people coming together from different walks of life and meeting through like one class or something like that. Just different ways people from all different walks of life come together and create a group. I realized I had a number of those books on my shelves because I do have a little bit of a soft spot for those. So I got some of those together that I read recently, figured I would talk about them. So let's see, I'll start with The Life Drawing for Beginners by Roisin Meaney. I believe she's an Irish author. And this has to do with Audrey, who is teaching a life drawing class, which is another way of saying those classes you go to, well, I've never been to one, but the classes where they have like the nude models that you sketch to learn how to realistically draw the human body. That's what life drawing is. Yeah, she starts offering to do this class for people. It's just sort of like an extracurricular thing people can sign up for. So she starts getting these people in the neighborhood to come in, and they all come from different walks of life and are signing up for the class for different reasons. There's Zarek, the Polish immigrant who comes to Ireland and is working in he's like a fast food job or a diner job or something like that, and he gets not too far into the job, he gets kind of burnt out on just like rude customer service and the monotony of the job and all that. You also learn that he has a bunch of just traumatic experiences within his own family he's trying to heal from. So he takes this class as sort of a way to escape all that and just clear his head for a while. There's him, and then there's Jackie and James are 2 other big characters. James is a architect who is a recently single dad. Everybody in the book has sort of like a dark element to their story, kind of, or a sad story, I guess, to backstory. They all have reasons for coming to this class to sort of find healing and friendship and trust with society again. So there's James, and then Jackie is the actual model for the class. And Jackie is interesting because even though she's the model for the class, she's really self-conscious about her body. She thinks she's too fat to be the model, but she agrees to do the class because she needs the money, and she has a little boy that she's trying to raise. And I thought it was cool that Audrey, as the teacher for the class, points out to Jackie that in a lot of art, the perfection is in the imperfection. If it was perfect all the time, nobody would be that impressed by it. It's just, oh, it's pretty, you know. No, the stuff that really gets to people is the stuff that's a little bit gritty, a little bit rough around the edges. So it's okay not to have the perfect body in art. And through this job, Jackie starts to find confidence in herself, and it starts to be more about than just about getting a paycheck to, you know, raise her kid. And it's also cute that James and Jackie's kids, they have both have small children, through their school they end up being friends unexpectedly. So Jackie and James sort of find more ways to interact with each other. And then there's also the story of Michael, who runs the pet shop where Audrey gets her little puppy. And Michael at first seems kind of surly. He's kind of standoffish and just find a pet and move on kind of with his customers. You find out later he has a reason for being the way he is, and as, you know, walled up as he is. And I think his story impacted me the most in this book. It was really sad and dark, but it was cool to see him come out the other side of it. But overall, this one was okay for me. It had some good stuff. I liked the character study element of it. I liked learning people's backstories and sort of looking into why people are the way they are, but the actual plot itself was a little bit slow for me, and it jerked around a lot between all the different characters. It gave me a little bit of a headache reading it, because it would, just as you got settled into one character, it'd be over here all of a sudden. So it also got to be a little bit frustrating trying to keep track of everybody's stories so close together. So yeah, this one, it was okay. But I mainly picked this one up because when I read the synopsis in the story, it sounded very similar to Erica Baeurmeister's books, which I really have enjoyed. The two I was thinking of are The School of Essential Ingredients and The Lost Art of Mixing, its sequel. And it's actually pretty cool. On the inside pages in here, under praise, there actually is a blurb from Erica Baeurmeister. So yeah, I thought that was kind of cool that there actually was a tie-in. It wasn't just me reading into that. I read these a while back. I will try to track down my reviews for them and see if I can post them below. They may be on my archived blog post, but I'll see if I can track them down. This is a while back. But yeah, I highly recommend these books. The Life Journaling for Beginners, it had a very similar feel, a very similar idea to this, but these books have to do with people coming together in a cooking class, while that one is art class. So it's a similar idea, but I thought with Baeurmeister's books, she fleshes out her characters a little bit better, puts in a little bit more action to keep you reading and keep you really engaged with the characters. Between these two, I think I actually liked The School of Essential Ingredients a little bit better. I did like the Lost Art of Mixing, but I thought this one held my attention a little bit better, if I remember right. But like I said, I'll try to find the reviews down below. So yeah, if any of these sound like something you'd be into, I'd highly recommend at least checking out Baeurmeister's books. Okay, so the next one, you've heard me mention this one in a few blog videos. Haven't really gone into a lot of in-depth, but the Naughty Girls Book Club. And this was one I won on Goodreads a while back, and it falls under one of those ones of why didn't I get to this sooner? Because when I first looked at it, I wasn't really expecting that much from it. I assumed it was going to be a light, fluffy read that I was going to forget about, but now it's actually on my favorites shelf because I loved this book. It was so good. And this has to do with, I think Estelle is the name of the lady who owns this sort of like a bakery coffee shop type place, and there's a bookstore across the street from her, like a little independent shop. It ends up getting closed down, you know, just like city development and big chain stores coming in. It's kind of like the little bookshop on the corner, you know, you've got mail kind of thing where the store gets shut down. She watches this happen to these people, this couple that has the bookstore across the street, and she gets kind of freaked out and says, well, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm an independent business owner. I need some way to keep my store open, because her business, she noticed her business had started slowing down a little bit. So she gets the idea to start up this book club within her store, and she's like, well, I can invite people over and I can have them buy snacks and talk about books, and it can turn into this big thing that I do every week. It catches on with a few people. Initially she has, I think, like 4 or 5 people that show up, and when she starts out, she thinks she's gonna do like a legit book club, and she starts talking about classics and things like that. And the first, I think it's like the first book or two are the classics ones, and the people that come into the book club, they're like, they're okay reading classics, but you know, reading a lot of them together all at once is kind of draining and I'm getting kind of bored, and you know, can we read something else? Estelle gets worried that people are going to drop out of the book club and she's going to lose business, so she gets the idea to keep people there by throwing out the idea of, hey, let's read erotica and talk about that. And at first people are like, what? Whoa, I just said I wanted a break from classics. But they end up going for it, though. They're like, yeah, we'll try one out and see how it goes. And it ends up, everybody in the book club has their lives impacted by reading these novels. They start being able to talk to their life partners better, and they start finding more self-confidence and expressing what they want in life better, and going for world, traveling trips they want to go on, and having the courage to go for the life they want to have, all from reading dirty books, which I thought was a really cool idea. But it starts with that. It just takes the idea of, if you're comfortable in your skin, you're comfortable in your body, you can be comfortable with anything in your life. And I just liked the sort of empowerment message that was behind this. And not to mention, the book is actually really funny with the situations the women get into, especially when they try to introduce more risque bedroom maneuvers to their husbands and boyfriends. And at first the men are like, whoa, what are you talking about at that book club that you come home with this? But then, of course, they're guys, so after a while they're like, all right, I'll hear you out. What do you want me to do? I think I related to Rebecca the most because she sounds like she's sort of in my age group and my generation. They talk about her being newly married, and I've only been married a few years, and they talk about her, having to be away from her husband a lot, so when they do get together, they sometimes don't really know how to talk to each other because they spend so much time apart. She ends up bringing these ideas she wants to draw in the bedroom to him. She goes so far as to be like, okay, well, let's get into like BDSM, dominatrix stuff, but she's just a regular girl. She doesn't really know what she's doing with it. She just thinks why not? It might get him excited again. But it just cracked me up the way she sort of bumbled through it, because it was realistic. She talks about how she's trying to be this like tough, badass dominatrix chick, but she's worried about tripping in the carpet with her stripper heels and accidentally hitting herself with her whip. She talks about like, she had blindfolded her husband, and she's like, oh, what am I gonna do with you? And she's like, no, seriously, I don't know what to do. What am I gonna do with you? And she talks about like trying to spank him, but then when he cries out, she's like, oh God, oh, I'm sorry. And then she realized that was so not dominatrix to be like, I'm sorry. But it's realistic. That's what would happen with us just regular people bringing that in. So I was cracking up through so much of this. And there's also Gracie, who is, I think she's like in her really early 20s, like 21, 22, something like that. And Gracie starts out as this hardcore militant feminist that thinks that every erotica book is, encouraging the patriarchy, and she goes on all these rants, and all the women around her are like, it's okay to like sex. It's okay. Calm down. And she starts out feeling really bad that she has some interest in lingerie because she feels like she's feeding into male power and things like that. But it was cool to see Gracie kind of calm down and embrace the idea that if you like sex, if you like lingerie, it's not that you're less of a woman or you're feeding into the patriarchy or any of that. You're just embracing yourself as a female. And it was cool to see her feministic views develop into a healthy feminism and not the militant side of feminism, where you just make everybody feel guilty about everything. And then there was also what was his name? Reggie, I think. He was the only guy in the group, and he comes in with the idea saying, oh, I'm just here for observation, because he said he was working on his master's in literature, and he wanted to do his thesis on how literature can bring communities together and all that. And they're like, okay, fine, hang out, that's cool, you're just here to observe. And then he starts reading all the books, and he starts reading all this erotica literature, and he starts out being this really geeky, nerdy book kid who specializes in classic lit and stuff, and then he, as the story progresses, he gets more comfortable with himself and more comfortable around women and starts to become bolder and, you know, starts to comb his hair a little bit different. His clothes get better because he starts to get some swagger to him. It's just like the character development in this was so good. So I highly recommend you check this one out. The next one I read was A Cup of Friendship by Deborah Rodrigquez, who wrote the memoir Kabul Beauty School. This was published as something else originally. I think it was originally published as Little Coffee Shop in Kabul, or maybe that's what the title is now. But that's the other title it's published under. I think it's called The Little Coffee Shop in Kabul or something like that. Same book though. And then she published a memoir called Kabul Beauty School. And this talks about the woman Sunny, who is originally from Arkansas, and she decides she wants a little adventure in her life. So she decides she's going to go with her boyfriend and open up a coffee shop in the middle of war-torn Afghanistan. I would just go on a road trip, but you know, everybody defines adventure their own way. But yeah, she decides she's going to open up this coffee shop in Kabul, Afghanistan. So she's joins this community, and then her boyfriend goes off a bunch because he ends up getting work. And he's not exactly in the military, but they hint that he was sort of contracted as like a freelance sniper with the military that could sneak into places. So he's gone all the time, and she's left by herself in this community, which she does all right for the most part, except every so often, you know, you have the bullets flying and they have to worry about, you know, bombs outside the cafe walls and things like that. And there's an elderly lady who owns the building where Sunny has her coffee shop. The older woman's son is he has a job standing guard outside the coffee shop, and he tells everybody that comes in, soldiers or townspeople or whatever, drop your guns at the door. No guns allowed. And he just has to stand there and take everybody's weaponry away from them just so they can go get a cup of coffee. And he watches for, you know, any suspicious vehicles, anything like that. It just seems weird to have a chill place like a coffee shop in an environment like that. But on the other hand, that seems like a place where it would be really necessary to have an escape place like that. But yeah, she's running this shop. She ends up taking in this girl, Yasmina, I think is her name. And Yasmina was taken from her father. Yasmina is a grown woman. I think she's maybe like mid-20s, I think. 24, 25, something like that. Somewhere in there. She's already been married. Yasmina's husband was killed by a IED, I think. Yasmina is taken by they're basically like the Middle Eastern version of loan sharks. Her father had borrowed a bunch of money from these guys, and it turns out he couldn't pay it back as soon as they wanted him to, and so they took Yasmina kind of as collateral and said, well, you owe us a bunch of money, so we'll hold her for a while, and if you don't get our money to us by this date, we're gonna sell your daughter to the highest bidder. On the way to wherever they were going to take her, somebody in the car discovers that Yasmina is actually pregnant, and they just ditch her on the side of the road because now she's useless property to them. They can't prostitute her out if she's already pregnant. So she ends up being taken in by Sunny. She thinks she's hiding her pregnancy, but Sunny picks up on it right away. But she doesn't say anything because she doesn't want to make it awkward, and she doesn't want to bring attention to Yasmina that could further threaten her life. So they all sort of develop this community within this coffee shop. There's also I can't remember his name, but there's a man who I think is with the military or contracted with them again, that hangs out in the coffee shop a lot, that Sunny has been sort of flirting with. And I don't know, that relationship really bothered me in this book because he points out that he's married, but in the story their relationship still, the flirtation still continues and they still encourage it. So I don't know. I'm one of those people that's a little bit unsettled with blatant infidelity in novels. I just don't take infidelity lightly, and so it bugs me when it comes up in books, and it's just like, oh, whatever, you got a wife back home, you know, she doesn't have to know. I don't know. That mentality bugs me. So that was one thing that bothered me about the story. And then there's also the story of Isabel. Isabel starts out studying, she's trying to do a story about the opium trade in the area, and then while she's investigating the opium trade, she's trying to do this big expose. Or while she's investigating that, her leads end up leading her to a sex trafficking ring instead. So then that turns into a big thing. She befriends this woman, Candace, who, I think they said Candace was the wife of a big politician in America, and then through some charity event or something, she ends up meeting an Afghan man who she leaves her husband for and goes to Afghanistan and starts a relationship with him, and he woos her and tells her together they're going to build all these schools for children, and it's going to be great, and this big humanitarian effort, and they're going to be the strongest couple ever. And then it turns out some of the money she was giving him, he says it was going to schools, but then when Isabel starts investigating, she finds out there's a possibility that the schools that they're building are maybe fronts for Taliban training grounds. So there's a lot of that going on. This one, you know, a lot of these other books I had mentioned so far, they're very lighthearted. This one was much darker in tone. This talks a lot about war and the Taliban and people living in these areas, and it's a little more gritty. I liked that aspect of it because, you know, that's just a reality we live with now, but just the plot as a whole, I didn't get that attached to the characters. So this one was okay for me. There was something to the writing style I did like, so I'm kind of curious to check out Rodriguez's memoir, Kabul Beauty School, because I have heard really good things about that. But as a whole, this one was just, it's like a 3 for me. It was a good read, but there's not a lot I'm going to take away from it. And then the last one I have to mention for the book club, or for the club-like reads, is I recently finished up The End of Your Life book club. This one's actually a memoir. It's a little bit different in this one because this is actually just a little club this guy makes between him and his mother, but I figured it was kind of in the same vein, so I would throw it in. This is a memoir where Will Schwalbe talks about his mother and how she did a lot of humanitarian work, I think either in Africa or the Middle East, somewhere over there, did a lot of like clean water missions and things like that, getting medicine to people. And on one of her trips back home, she falls really violently ill, and when they get her to the hospital, they initially suspect it's a pretty strong case of hepatitis, but when the doctors go to do more testing, they find out that while there is evidence of hepatitis in her, it's not viral. It's actually within, I think they said the hepatitis was within a tumor in her bile duct, which I had never heard of hepatitis developing that way, so I thought that was interesting. But it turns out that cued them on to the fact that she actually had pretty advanced pancreatic cancer that hadn't been caught yet. By the time they found it, it had already spread through her system a good bit. You know, there's not any good cancer out there, but pancreatic cancer is one of the most violently spreading ones, and the odds of getting out of it are not usually that good. There have been people that have survived it, but they talk about in this book that a lot of times if the doctor says it's pancreatic, then they're a little bit doubtful of your odds of survival, but never know. He talks about his mom going into the battle to fight against this pancreatic cancer that had taken over her body. So they're going to all these doctor's visits and she goes through all this chemo and everything, and he, somewhere along the line of sitting through all these appointments with her and her having to sit in these chairs while she gets these treatments done, he said, well, we have to sit here all this time anyway, why don't we start up a little book club? And because he said there was always a love of books between them anyway, they were always talking about books with each other, so he's like, I gotta pass the time anyway, so why don't we start up a little book club and start recommending books to each other, or start reading the same thing and having discussions about it. And so they start doing that. Through the process of reading these titles together, the stories themselves sort of help trigger conversations between Will and his mother in a way that may have not been as easy to do otherwise. And so having these discussions about books ends up making her comfortable to talk about things in her life that maybe she didn't want to bring up before, or she starts talking about some of her fears and some of the things she's been thinking about just in life in general that all this reading had triggered in her mind. And he also talks about why certain books were important to her, or why she was drawn to certain genres or topics. It was just a really, it's bittersweet because the ending is touching but sad. It ended up being a sweet read. I really liked the way he described his mom. She sounded like a really cool lady who had a really good way of looking at things. And he also talks about how books affected him growing up because of the impact his parents' love of books had on him. Will himself talks about when he first found his love of Tolkien. And he said, when I was 9 years old, I fell head and heels over love with The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I read it when we were on vacation in Morocco. I'd become terribly sick with a temperature of 104, and the Moroccan doctor gave me the only medicine he had, which turned out to be almost pure morphine. Feverish, drugged, and delirious, I lay in a bed in a luminous house in Tangier, mint tea by my side, reading The Hobbit for days on end as I drifted in and out of consciousness. I remember the tea, hot and sweet and delicious, and the breeze from the ocean and the whitewashed walls, and I remembered the handsome Moroccans who would come in and out of the room to make sure I was okay. And most of all, I remember The Hobbit, the most phantasmagorical book I could ever imagine. Only years later did I discover that half of what I remembered was Tolkien, and the other half was the product of my febrile, narcoticized mind. Through all these stories and all these memories he has with his mother, he just brings up the fact of how powerful simply reading a book can be, and how it can give us strength to deal with things that maybe we wouldn't find strength otherwise for. Like when he talks about actually starting up this book club with his mom, he said at first he kind of did it as something to make her happy and put her at ease while she's going through all this pain, but he admits that in the beginning he wasn't that excited to read all of these books that she wanted him to read. He was like, I want to go home and read what I want to read, but he was trying to be the good kid and he knew it would make his mom happy, so he kind of like grudgingly started this at first, but then when he got into it, it dawned on him that there was actually some real benefit to getting into these books. And like he points out, these books showed us that we didn't need to retreat or cocoon. They reminded us that no matter where Mom and I were on our individual journeys, we could still share books. And while reading those books, we wouldn't be the sick person and the well person. We would simply be a mother and son entering new worlds together. And what's more is books provide much needed ballast, something we both craved amid the chaos and upheaval of Mom's illness. This only occurred to me later. At the time, I remember feeling that I was a little too busy for it all, that reading these books with Mom was so time-consuming that it was keeping me both from being useful to her and from reading other books I'd been wanting to read. But there would be such disappointment in Mom's voice if I hadn't yet started reading a book she knew I'd love, that I continued to read whatever she gave me or suggested, and to recommend books to her that I thought she would like. So it's fair to say that Mom started the book club unwittingly, and I joined it grudgingly. But, he goes on to say that it ended up giving him a lot of peace and showed him a side of his mom that he may have not found otherwise, because he got into the literature that spoke to her and eventually spoke to him too. So I do recommend that one. The thing with that, I would say though, is this book, it doesn't, if you're looking for books that are just like, if you're going solely for books that are about books, this one struck me as not being as heavy in that department as I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be, look at all these cool books we read, but it was more like a tribute memoir to his mother and her story, her cancer story, and then the books they read were sort of sprinkled throughout, and he talks about how those books sort of triggered these moments, but the focus didn't really feel like it was on the books themselves, which was fine. I'm just saying that, you know, be aware of that so you know what you're getting before you go in. And I know some of these books, when you get into books about books kind of stories, that some people fear running into spoilers if they talk about books you haven't read yet. I think for the most part that End of Your Life book club stayed pretty spoiler free. I think it helps that a lot of what they talk about, most of the books they cover are either classics or philosophical or religious texts, or they also read a lot of cultural fiction, international authors that are, for the most part, probably going to be pretty obscure to most American readers. Like, I think he talks about reading Bolano, who is a Chilean writer, I believe. But he does mention some people that you would probably be familiar with. He mentions reading Alice Munro stories, and Jhumpa Lahiri, and Khaled Hosseini, and Stieg Larsson, Geraldine Brooks. He mentioned reading Alan Bennett, which you guys probably know I did a whole video just on Alan Bennett's book. One of the books they chose to read was The Uncommon Reader, so I was really excited to see that. They also read Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, which I've seen a lot on BookTube this year. People hauling that in their library halls and putting it on their TBRs. And he also mentioned that they read The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. It's another memoir of a college professor who was battling terminal pancreatic cancer. And The Last Lecture was actually a book that the Retired Book Nerd mentioned on her channel, I think on one of her Memoir Monday videos. I forget which one. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool to see that. And he mentions that he was a little bit hesitant for his mom to read that book because he thought that it was going to make her really sad, but he was surprised to find, she said it actually made her really grateful for all of the great things she had in her life, and the fact that she had been around long enough to see her grandkids. And she said, you know, in his book he talks about his kids still being small or not having grandkids yet. And so she's like, I felt for him that he's not going to know his grandkids. I at least got that. So yeah, she just had this really like optimistic viewpoint to the whole situation, which I found really inspiring. I feel like cancer memoirs, uplifting reads, that kind of thing, I would recommend at least giving this one a once over. I wasn't riveted by it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. There was something to it that felt a little bit distanced. I wasn't, you know, just over the moon moved by it. I thought it was really sweet in the end, but I don't know, there was just something to it that felt something was missing. Like I said, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it just felt a little bit more distanced than I was expecting. But yeah, I would still say it's worth a once over. If you're interested in just the books, he does put a thing in the back of just a list of all the books and authors they covered. I think it was over the course of like 2 or 3 years maybe they did this. I can't remember now. Maybe it was just a year. I kind of lost track, but would recommend looking in that one at least. So that's my overview of books that are about clubs coming together, or people from different walks of life making a club out of something. I don't know. But yeah, I think this has gone on long enough. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching. And I will try to put my reviews to all these down below, and the next video coming up should be about the vintage lovers that I accidentally promised at the beginning of this, but I got mixed up. So if you're looking for the vintage lovers books, that's the next video coming up, so stay tuned and we'll see you then. Bye guys!